When Daniel peeked into his wife's suitcase, he thought he'd find sunscreen and yoga pants. Instead, he uncovered black lace lingerie, boxes of condoms, and a secret that would shatter two families. But instead of confronting her in private, he decided to expose her in front of hundreds, on a cruise she'd never forget. Daniel Parker never thought of himself as the suspicious type. At 36, he'd built a stable life in Portland with his wife, Clara. 10 years of marriage. A small house near the river. 2 dogs. Predictable routines he used to find comforting. Clara had always been the organized one, the first to book their vacations, the first to send birthday cards to his relatives. When she announced she and her best friend, Lacey, were going on a week-long wellness cruise, he didn't question it. She said they needed time away. No kids, no husbands, no work emails. Yoga, spa treatments, digital detox. It sounded harmless enough. Except this time, something felt off, though Daniel couldn't put his finger on why. Maybe it was the way she barely looked at him when she said goodbye, or how she flinched when he offered to drive her to the port. She insisted she'd booked a rideshare instead. No reason given. Just a tight smile, like she was reassuring a stranger. That evening, after she packed, Daniel tried to shake the feeling. He cooked dinner, watched a show alone on the couch, but couldn't focus. Every time he replayed their last conversation, that hollow look in her eyes made his gut twist. When he heard the shower running, the thought came uninvited. If you trust her, why are you so nervous? He told himself it was nothing. Then he opened the bedroom door anyway. The suitcase sat near the closet, half-zipped. Daniel hesitated. He had never once searched her things. He believed that if you had to look, your marriage was already broken. But something had shifted. He reached for the zipper and pulled it back. Inside were all the predictable items. Rolled sundresses, a hairbrush, a couple of paperback novels. He exhaled, feeling almost foolish, until he noticed a small zippered pouch tucked into the side, one he didn't recognize. He opened it and froze. 2 sets of black lace lingerie, still folded with price tags attached. A small bottle of vanilla-scented massage oil, and 3 unopened boxes of condoms. His vision blurred. For a moment, he wondered if he was misunderstanding, if there could be any explanation that made sense. Clara had never been reckless. She had always cared about appearances. She would never leave something like this in plain sight unless she no longer cared who found it. He felt the coldness in his chest harden into certainty. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the evidence. His first instinct was to confront her as soon as she stepped out of the shower, to demand the truth, to shout until she admitted it. But he didn't. Instead, he closed the suitcase slowly, sealing the lie back inside. He realized this wasn't about a single betrayal. It was bigger. He suspected Lacey was involved too. Clara and Lacey had been inseparable for years. They'd even joked about running away together if their husbands ever turned boring. He had laughed along, never imagining they might actually be planning something behind their backs. Daniel looked at the clock. Nearly midnight. He picked up his phone and scrolled to Rick's number. Rick, Lacey's husband, was a good man. Honest, maybe even too trusting. He deserved to know. His thumb hovered over the call button. Part of him still hoped he was wrong. But in that moment, he understood that hope wouldn't save him. He pressed the call icon. Rick answered on the second ring, his voice groggy. "Daniel? Everything okay?" "No," Daniel said, keeping his voice steady. Rick listened carefully. "I need you to meet me at the cruise terminal tomorrow morning. 5 a.m. Why? What's going on?" "I found something. I think they're both lying to us." Silence stretched so long Daniel wondered if the call had dropped. When Rick finally spoke, his voice sounded small. "Is this about Lacey?" "It's about Clara and Lacey," Daniel said. "And whoever they're meeting." Rick didn't ask any more questions. He just said he'd be there. Daniel ended the call and set the phone down. He thought he'd feel relief in sharing the burden. Instead, he felt the weight of it settle deeper into his bones. He walked back to the living room and sat alone in the dark. 10 years together, and somehow he hadn't seen this coming. The mind played tricks when you wanted to believe someone. It edited the evidence, smoothed out the jagged edges. But tonight, no illusions remained. When Clara stepped out of the shower and found him sitting quietly, she didn't seem alarmed. She barely looked at him as she crossed the room to retrieve her suitcase, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just hidden 1,000 tiny betrayals in that bag. Daniel didn't say a word. She went to bed early, claiming she needed to be up before dawn. Daniel lay awake, listening to her steady breathing. At 3 a.m., he rose, dressed, and carried his backpack to the car. The plan had started to form the moment he zipped the suitcase closed. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't accuse. He would watch. He would gather proof. And when the time was right, he'd let the truth speak for itself. The morning air was sharp when Daniel pulled into the cruise terminal parking lot. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the place was already stirring. Workers moved luggage carts along the sidewalk. Taxis idled by the curb, waiting to drop off passengers eager for a week of escape. Daniel sat in his car, hands tight around the steering wheel. He watched the entrance, half hoping Rick wouldn't show that he'd imagined everything. But at 4:52 a.m., a blue sedan pulled up beside him. Rick stepped out. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. Daniel got out to meet him. For a moment, they just stared at each other. 10 years of casual friendship had never prepared them for this. "You brought it?" Daniel asked. Rick nodded and lifted a small camera bag onto the hood of his car. "This is everything I've got: camera, lenses, backup batteries. If they're here with someone, we'll have proof." Daniel took a breath. "I installed a GPS tracker in Clara's suitcase. We'll know which cabin she checks into." Rick's jaw tensed. "You think it's both of them?" "I'm sure." Neither of them spoke for a long minute. Then Rick opened the passenger door and pulled out a baseball cap. He shoved it onto his head like it was armor. "Let's get this over with." They walked across the lot to a small cafe with big windows facing the terminal entrance. The lights inside were warm and bright. The contrast made everything outside look colder. Daniel chose a table near the glass. Rick set the camera on the chair beside him, hidden under his jacket. They didn't order coffee. They didn't need it. The adrenaline alone kept them alert. At 6:12 a.m., Clara and Lacey appeared. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He'd known they would come, but seeing it confirmed something final. They were both smiling. Lacey pulled a rolling suitcase behind her, chatting in a voice too soft to hear. Clara's phone was in her hand. She typed something and laughed. Daniel clenched his jaw. Even from here, they looked relaxed, like two women about to start an innocent vacation. Then the men appeared. Two strangers approached from the taxi lane. Both were casually dressed, carrying small bags. One leaned in and kissed Lacey on the cheek. The other wrapped his arm around Clara's waist. She didn't flinch. She didn't look around. She only tilted her head and kissed him back. Daniel felt the moment cut through whatever hope he'd been clinging to. Rick sucked in a shaky breath. "You were right," he said, voice low. "God, I hoped you weren't." Neither man looked away. They watched as Clara and Lacey handed over their tickets and walked inside with the two men. Rick reached for the camera. "We start now." Daniel pulled out his phone, checking the tracker. The GPS dot was moving toward the security checkpoint. He tapped Rick's arm. "They're boarding." Rick raised the camera and began filming through the window. The lens followed Clara's hand as she squeezed the man's shoulder. The man leaned close, whispering something that made her laugh again. Daniel had never seen her laugh like that with him. When the group disappeared from sight, Daniel swallowed, the nausea rising in his throat. He reminded himself why they were here. This wasn't about revenge yet. It was about clarity. They waited until the terminal emptied. Daniel checked the app. The GPS signal showed Clara's suitcase somewhere near Deck 9. He looked at Rick. "We have to get on that ship." Rick nodded, his face set. "I'll book a cabin under a fake name. Make sure it's close enough to keep watch, but not on the same deck," Daniel said. "If they see us, this is over." They returned to the parking lot and sat in Rick's car with the engine running. Rick used his phone to reserve the last available suite on Deck 7. Daniel paid in cash for a boarding pass with an alias, David Grant. Rick became Michael Harris. By the time they finished, the sun had risen. The normalcy of daylight made everything feel stranger. This was supposed to be a vacation cruise. Instead, it was a trap. Rick shut off the ignition. "Once we're on board, we can split shifts. One of us watches. One sleeps. We document everything." Daniel nodded. "We don't confront them. We don't tip them off." Rick looked at him steadily. "And when we have what we need?" Daniel's voice came out quiet but certain. "Then we end it." They grabbed their bags and walked to the check-in counter. Daniel tried to keep his expression neutral as the clerk scanned his pass. He wondered if she could see the betrayal in his face. Once on board, they parted ways. Rick headed straight to their cabin to set up his equipment. Daniel went to the upper deck lounge to get a better signal for the tracker. The dot hadn't moved, it hovered over a suite labeled 9C. At noon, Rick sent a text, "I'm in position. I'll watch the hallway. You watch the deck." Daniel replied, "Stay invisible. Don't let them see you." They fell into a rhythm. Rick monitored the suite entrance. Daniel tracked Clara's phone and watched the adults-only pool from above. They used coded messages for everything: colors, numbers, times. It felt like a surveillance op more than a marriage unraveling. At 2:37 p.m., the GPS stop moved. Daniel glanced over the railing and saw them emerge onto the pool deck. Clara was holding a plastic cup, gesturing animatedly to the man beside her. Lacey and her companion sat on a lounger nearby, close enough to touch. Daniel felt the familiar ache in his chest, but he didn't look away. He lifted his phone, snapped a photo, and typed a message to Rick. "Target in sight. Recording now." Rick's reply came instantly, "Copy that. Stay focused." He forced himself to watch as Clara leaned her head against the man's shoulder. She didn't look guilty. She looked content. Daniel understood then that this wasn't an accident or a moment of weakness. She had planned it. She had known exactly what she was doing when she zipped that suitcase shut. He lowered the phone, steadied his breath, and prepared for the next step. By the third day, Daniel's exhaustion had settled into something sharper. He no longer felt stunned when he watched Clara with the other man. He no longer wondered if there was some innocent explanation. Now, he only cared about collecting the evidence that would end her deceit for good. Every morning, he checked the GPS tracker. Every afternoon, he sat in the upper deck lounge with his phone and camera, documenting everything. Rick did the same from the opposite side of the ship. They barely spoke in person, but their text updates were constant. At 8 a.m., Rick would message, "Suite occupied. No movement." At 10 a.m., subjects left cabin together. By early afternoon, Daniel could count on the same pattern. Clara and her lover would head to the pool or the casino, always touching, always laughing. Lacey and her companion followed them like an echo. Daniel filled 2 SD cards with videos. He recorded the moments when Clara leaned in for a kiss, when she pressed her palm to the man's chest as if claiming him. Each image felt like confirmation that he hadn't imagined this betrayal. On the third evening, Daniel sat alone at the ship's small internet cafe. He worked through the footage, organizing clips by time and location, adding captions to each file. He knew this level of detail mattered. If Clara tried to deny what she'd done, he would have a timeline to dismantle every lie. The cafe was mostly empty. The only sounds were soft footsteps and the low hum of the ship's engines. Daniel's mind was clear in a way it hadn't been since the night he opened her suitcase. He thought about what would happen when they docked. The conversations he'd have to endure. The looks of pity or judgment. He didn't care anymore. He had already accepted that their marriage was over. At 10:17 p.m., Rick approached and took the seat across from him. He looked tired but determined. "I got audio," Rick said without preamble. Daniel looked up. "Audio?" Rick nodded. "I was on the upper deck near the bar. They were sitting together. She was telling him she never planned to come back to you." Daniel didn't respond right away. He pulled his laptop closer and opened a new folder. "Send it to me." Rick handed him a thumb drive. "There's more." "What?" Rick hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment and then turned the screen around. A text message thread glowed in the dim light. Daniel read it twice before the words sank in. Clara had sent it, thinking she was texting her lover's real number. "Can you believe how easy this is? Just keep them stupid and loyal. 3 more nights to do whatever we want." Daniel felt a strange calm as he read it again. He didn't feel rage or humiliation. Just a sense of finality. "She sent that 2 hours ago," Rick said quietly. "She thinks we're at home, waiting for them to come back." Daniel set the phone down. Then it settled. "We end this tomorrow." Rick didn't argue. They left the cafe without another word. The next morning, Daniel woke before dawn. He didn't feel tired anymore. He felt focused. He dressed, packed up the hard drives and thumb drives, and checked the GPS location again. Still in Suite 9C. At 8 a.m., the ship announced a couple's sunset mixer on the upper deck. A cocktail hour, photos, live music. It was the perfect moment, public enough that Clara and Lacey couldn't spin their stories. He met Rick near the elevator. They reviewed the plan one final time. "We'll let them relax," Daniel said. "Let them feel safe. Then," Daniel looked him in the eye, "then we let the truth speak for itself." At 6:30 p.m., they watched from the far end of the deck as Clara and Lacey arrived, each hand in someone else's. The four of them blended into the crowd, drinks in hand, smiling like nothing in the world could touch them. Daniel felt the last flicker of sadness burn out. He approached the DJ, a young man with a polite smile, clearly used to handling requests. Daniel handed him a small USB drive. "Play this video when I give you the signal." The DJ raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The DJ nodded. "I'll cue it up." Daniel turned back to Rick. They positioned themselves near the bar, facing the crowd. Clara didn't notice them. She was too busy leaning into her lover's side, whispering in his ear. Rick's phone buzzed with a text from a mutual friend who'd agreed to monitor social media. "Everything is ready. If they try to deny it, the files go live." Daniel read the message and exhaled. This was no longer about revenge. It was about ending the deception. He waited until the music shifted to a slow, romantic song. Until Clara and Lacey moved to the center of the deck, close enough for everyone to see them clearly. Then he raised his hand and signaled the DJ. The speakers went silent. For a moment, the crowd looked confused. Then the screens flickered to life. The first images were still shots: Clara's suitcase, the lingerie, the condoms. Gasps rippled through the audience. Then came the videos. Clara's kisses with the stranger. Lacey's whispered promises. Their text messages displayed in bold white letters on the screen. "Just keep them stupid and loyal." People turned to stare. Clara's eyes widened. She looked from the screen to Daniel, her mouth opening in shock. She tried to step forward, but Rick held up his phone. "We've been recording everything," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Every lie. Every touch. Every word." Clara's lover dropped her hand. Lacey backed away, her face pale. Daniel didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just looked at her and spoke in a voice calm and clear. "I trusted you," he said. "And you mocked me for it." Security moved in, escorting Clara and Lacey away from the crowd. Around them, the deck erupted in a low buzz of shock and disbelief. Phones came out. People whispered. Daniel watched her go, feeling no satisfaction, only relief that it was finally over. Rick turned to him, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said. Daniel nodded. And for the first time in days, he felt free. The cruise ship docked in Seattle on a bright, cloudless morning. As passengers disembarked, clusters of strangers whispered and glanced in Daniel's direction. He didn't need to hear their words to understand. They all knew. The video had spread through the decks like a spark in dry grass, impossible to contain. Rick walked beside him, silent. They'd agreed to leave the ship together, collect their bags, and go their separate ways. They had done what they came to do, and there was nothing left to say. While they waited in line for customs, Daniel glanced over at the security station. 2 uniformed crew members stood guard beside a side exit. Clara and Lacey were there, clutching their luggage, avoiding everyone's eyes. Their boyfriends were gone. Daniel hadn't seen them since the mixer. He thought there might be a final confrontation, but there wasn't. No shouting. No explanations. No begging. Just the flat acknowledgement that everything was finished. As soon as he cleared customs, Daniel turned his phone back on. Notifications flooded the screen: missed calls, voicemails, text messages. Clara's number appeared again and again. He ignored them all. Outside the terminal, Rick paused. He looked tired, but there was something steady in his eyes Daniel hadn't seen before. "You heading home?" Rick asked. Daniel shook his head. "I booked a hotel for a few days. I don't want to walk back into that house yet." Rick nodded. "I'm going to see my lawyer." They didn't hug or shake hands. They simply parted. 2 men who had watched their marriages unravel in real time, now bound by something more enduring than friendship, the knowledge they hadn't deserved any of it. Daniel found a quiet spot in the terminal parking lot and called Clara's parents. He didn't want them to hear it secondhand. Her father answered. His voice sounded older than Daniel remembered. "Daniel? Is she back yet?" "Yes. She's here," Daniel said, keeping his tone neutral. There was a pause. Then her father spoke again, careful and measured. "Is it true? The things people are saying?" "It's all true," Daniel said. Another long silence. He could almost picture her parents standing side by side in their kitchen, trying to make sense of it. Her mother finally took the phone. "We're sorry," she said softly. "We always thought something was off this past year, but we didn't know." He didn't know what to say to that, so he only replied, "Thank you for calling." After he hung up, he booked a ride to the hotel. The driver didn't make small talk. Daniel was grateful. He needed quiet to sort through the last 72 hours. At the hotel, he checked into a standard room with nothing personal in it, no photos, no memories. He set his luggage by the desk and pulled out the external hard drives. He had proof of everything. Now he needed to decide what to do with it. He thought about revenge. About posting the footage online for the world to see. About sending it to everyone Clara had ever known. But as he sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion washed over him. He realized he didn't care about humiliating her any further. What mattered was making sure she couldn't lie her way back into his life. That evening, Clara called again. He let it go to voicemail. Her voice came through the speaker, shaky and small. "Daniel, please? I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looked like. Just call me back. We can talk about this." He deleted the message without listening to the rest. Rick texted an hour later. "Served her papers." She didn't say a word. Daniel replied, "Good. Let me know if you need anything." He didn't hear back. The following day, Daniel met with his own attorney. The man was professional, unfazed by the situation. He looked over the evidence Daniel provided, the photos, videos, timestamps, and transcripts. When he finished, he closed the file and said, "She won't contest this. It's too thorough." Daniel nodded. He felt a flicker of relief that the process might be clean. A week passed in that hotel room. Clara called every day. Each time, the voicemail sounded more desperate. She apologized, she pleaded, she demanded explanations. He never picked up. When he finally returned to the house, it felt hollow. He walked from room to room, seeing the evidence of their shared life, the framed wedding photos, the 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, the coffee mugs she insisted on collecting from every vacation. He packed a few boxes of clothes and left everything else untouched. Later, he would sort it out. For now, he only wanted distance. As he loaded the boxes into his car, Clara's vehicle pulled into the driveway. She stepped out quickly, as if she'd been waiting for this chance. "Daniel, please, just talk to me." He closed the trunk without looking at her. "You don't get to rewrite this," he said evenly. Her voice cracked. "It didn't mean anything. It meant enough that you planned it," he said. She stepped closer. "Can't we at least try it?" "No," he interrupted. "I don't trust you. I don't respect you. And that's the end." For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then her shoulders dropped. She turned away, covering her face with her hand. Daniel got into his car and drove away. He didn't look in the mirror. That evening, he booked a small apartment near the river. 1 bedroom. No reminders of the life he'd shared with her. When he sent his forwarding address to his lawyer, he added a single sentence. "She is not welcome here." The reply came back. "Understood. We'll make sure she can't contest it." Daniel set his phone aside. For the first time since opening that suitcase, he felt like he could breathe. 6 months passed. Daniel never imagined how quickly a life could be dismantled and rebuilt, how one decision could split everything into before and after. In the beginning, he marked the days by what he no longer did. No waiting for Clara's car in the driveway. No checking his phone for her messages. No wondering if she was telling the truth. Over time, the absence stopped feeling like emptiness and started to feel like peace. He settled into his new apartment. It was smaller, simpler. A single bedroom. A balcony that looked out over the river. He didn't bring much with him, just clothes, a few books, and the hard drives containing all the proof. For a while, he thought he might need them to protect himself. But the day the divorce was finalized, he packed them into a locked box and shoved it into a closet. He hadn't touched them since. On paper, it was straightforward. The marriage dissolved without contest. Clara signed everything. She didn't call again after the court date. He suspected she knew any further contact would only confirm what everyone already understood: she had destroyed what they built. Occasionally, he still saw her number pop up in his call log, but she never left another voicemail. He never picked up. Rick called him 2 weeks after the settlement was complete. It was the first time they'd spoken since Seattle. "Just wanted to say thanks," Rick said. His voice was calmer than Daniel remembered. "I got full custody." She didn't even try to fight it. Daniel leaned against the balcony railing, feeling the cool air on his face. "I'm glad you and your daughter are okay." "We are," Rick said. There was a pause. "You know, I keep thinking about what you said on the ship." "What was that?" "That you don't have to shout to be heard. That sometimes the truth is enough." Daniel thought about it. It was the only thing that made sense by the end. Rick exhaled. "Yeah. Same here." After they hung up, Daniel stood outside a long time. The river was smooth and steady. He realized he wasn't angry anymore. He felt something closer to acceptance. The next morning, he woke early and went for a run along the waterfront. He passed couples walking dogs, parents pushing strollers. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like an outsider looking in. He was just another person starting over. He stopped at a bench overlooking the water. He sat there, breathing slowly, and thought about everything he'd learned. Betrayal didn't look the way he once imagined. It wasn't always obvious. It didn't announce itself with drama or confrontation. Instead, it slipped in quietly, missed calls, small lies, the refusal to meet someone's eyes. Looking back, he could see every warning sign he'd ignored. The way Clara started taking trips without him. The sudden insistence on privacy. The excuses about needing space. He remembered how badly he'd wanted to believe her even when the evidence piled up. He didn't hate her anymore. That surprised him most. He hated what she did, but not her. Hating her would have meant he still cared enough to hold on to the resentment. The divorce was clean. The memories were not. But he understood now that clarity was better than comfort. One afternoon, Daniel received a message from Rick. A photo popped up on his phone, Rick and his daughter standing on a hiking trail. They both looked relaxed, almost happy. The caption read, "We don't miss her. We remember and we smile anyway." Daniel saved the photo. He never replied. He didn't have to. He had his own routines now, early morning runs, work, evenings reading by the window. No one else's secrets in the room. No constant questions in his head. A friend asked him once if he regretted how everything unfolded, exposing the affair in front of strangers, ending it so publicly. Daniel thought about it carefully before he answered. "I don't regret it," he said. They counted on us staying quiet. On us being too ashamed to call them out. If I'd kept it private, they'd still be lying to everyone. This way, there was no more pretending. The friend nodded, but Daniel could tell she didn't fully understand. Most people couldn't. Until you'd watched someone you loved build a secret life right in front of you, you couldn't know what it did to your sense of reality. In the end, he decided it didn't matter if anyone else understood. He knew why he did it. He knew it was the only way to reclaim his life. One evening, he packed up the last of Clara's things, old photos, souvenirs from trips he no longer thought about. He set the boxes by the door for her to collect. Before closing the lid on the final box, he looked at the framed wedding picture they'd taken in California. For a moment, he wondered what version of her he was marrying that day. Maybe she believed her promises then. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it was finished. He set the photo face down in the box. The next morning, he left it outside his old house. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't wait to see if she picked it up. Driving away, he felt lighter. Like he'd finally stepped out of a story he never asked to be in. If there was a lesson in all of it, it wasn't that betrayal was inevitable. It was that you could survive it. You could stand in the wreckage and decide it wouldn't define you. That was the only closure he needed.